is being held on September 13th, 2016, 1 p.m. at Town Hall. The meeting is being audio and visually recorded, just for your information.
Thank you.
And with that, we've all been introduced already, so why don't we we'll let you give us a brief presentation of an overview, and then we got a number of questions we're going to ask, and it'll probably be about half an hour, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how things go. So go right ahead.
Thank you very much. As I said in your padfolio, we have our 5-minute agenda. Next, behind that is a list of municipal clients, so that you know that we are very familiar with the public bidding process, including being MCPPO certified. Behind that, we have a list of our elevator experience, and behind that, the pros and cons of interior versus exterior elevators. Let me tell you about the project team. So I'm Michael Teller, principal of CBI Consulting, and I'm a registered architect. Steve Watchman will be the project manager and the project architect for this project. Steve's also the chairman of the Historic Commission in Rockland, Mass. So he has a lot of experience with the CPA funding, historical commissions. We all do. CBI is an architectural and structural engineering design firm. We're about half and half. So having the structural engineering in-house tends to save a lot of time and increase our coordination. Our prime market is the restoration and repair of existing buildings. We're not out there building monuments and new schools and new office buildings. We fix buildings, and they stay fixed. And one of our specialties is elevators. We also do pools. We also do ornamental ironwork, and a tremendous amount of building envelope and historic. Everyone in our office does historic. This sheet I made up real quick. These are the list of elevators that we've done that's in our proposal. The yellow ones are exterior, the gray ones are interior, and all the green ones are historic. So it's a real quick and easy way to see our experience. I won't go into that now unless you have specific questions. We can talk about the pros and cons of each. Right now, I'd like Steve to talk about the historic preservation aspects of the project, especially the CPA funding.
Sure, and let me just, if you don't mind me asking to confirm this project is receiving CPA funding for the design?
Yes.
Okay. So we understand we have a lot of, as Michael said, a lot of experience with CPA funding. We understand the process. We oftentimes make presentations to the CPA and historic funds. We understand that this building is within a historical district, the Raleigh Center Historic District. So we also have a lot of experience working with historical commissions, and I'm familiar with the whole process, being a chairman in my own town. So that's something that we're very comfortable with, and we understand that the intent really is to harmonize with the existing building and the surroundings, no matter what the work is going to entail. And we'll get into it a little bit later, but very likely, if you have an interior or an exterior, there's likely going to be some impact on the exterior appearance of the building. And the understanding that this is bringing accessibility to the building is paramount importance to the town, and the viability of the building is really dependent on the fact that it continues to serve the municipality.
Right.
So that's in historic. A lot of historics are fanatics about appearance and everything, but I think most of us understand that this is the best for the building, best for the town, and best for all members of the town to get access to the building.
Right.
So.
And our ideas on you want to just jump in?
Sure. So we've been to the building. We've spent about an hour inside the building, understanding the ins and outs, the interior, the exterior, and looking at potential locations to locate an elevator. And we came up with a couple of options. We met with Ken, the building inspector, and some members of the town, and just got a feel for the building itself. And we looked at two different options, really to minimize impact. First of all, the building has a double-loaded corridor right down the middle of the building, which means gaining access to that from the exterior would be taking up some space regardless. So you're going to be losing some interior space even with an exterior addition. So we looked at primarily an interior application. And we have two options here in front of you. Option A, if you're looking at the street, Center Street, I believe is over here.
Yeah, this is School Street here, right?
School.
And that's the parking lot.
Parking's over
The
here.
ramp currently
Exactly.
is here.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, the ramp is here. It doesn't look like it's completely accessible, and it also is not a great historic representation either. So.
No, it's they need some repairs, which we're hoping to do. If you we're putting a new parking lot on the back. I know how long ago you were there, but.
Yeah.
Putting a new parking lot on the back to expand the ability for meetings to park, and also the Council on Aging. And, you know, one of our goals would be, we would like to anyway, eliminate that ugly looking ramp.
Yeah. So let me jump into option B, which I believe does that. If you gain access, this is where the ramp currently, you enter the building from
Right.
the top landing and
Into the meeting room.
Into the meeting
Right.
room. We would potentially be able to relocate the meeting room upstairs because you have a large unused space at the front of the building, unless you have it earmarked for something else.
Well, yeah, space is an issue because what we're doing, just as a quick thing, is we got the downstairs, we got the Board of Health in the corner. In the corner, they got the planning board. Those were our intent anyway, is to move upstairs into
Into
this
the front.
space.
Okay. Yep.
You know, depending on how we ultimately
Sure.
design it, but they all need more space and more privacy.
Sure.
Ultimately, we're hoping that we can get the Council on Aging to take this whole half of the floor,
Wow.
Okay.
because they need more, everybody needs more
Everyone needs
space.
more-
And even when we're
more
done here, we're
storage.
probably not gonna have enough space still, but it's the best we can do with what we have to work with. So.
Well, the intent is to minimize the amount of space that this
Right,
elevator
we're looking
takes
to
up.
minimize the exterior if we can. I mean, if we have to put it on the outside, that's fine, but we, you know, and at the same time, maintain as much interior space.
So,
as
so
we
this
can.
first option, option B, really only carves out a small hallway. Both of these options are you enter at grade level, and then it's a pass-through situation. So you exit on the first floor and the second floor at those
Correct.
levels. So option B really is cited in this location. Option A here in red, first floor and second floor is currently there was some plumbing bathrooms over
Right.
here on the center here. This is adjacent to the vestibule at the main entry.
Right, there's
So
an
you get-
office in there now.
Right.
Yeah. So in either case, you're losing some interior space.
Right.
This option kills both bathrooms on these two levels, which aren't being used now anyway. This one carves out a cord.
No, hold up a second.
This is the
This is-
district
that's
offices
the
over.
main bathroom here.
Right,
now.
the district office is here on the
That
first
used
floor.
to be a bathroom.
Correct.
It's been eliminated.
Right.
Okay.
And upstairs may still be a bathroom, but it's locked, and of course, there's no access.
Yeah, we're more,
even if
if
you-
you went upstairs, we're more likely for a handicap bathroom at the other, above this one, because it's a bigger space.
Correct. That's why we
Right.
showed it down here, in addition to being next to the parking. But even if you put an exterior elevator here or here, if you put it in this corner, you'd need a corridor to get in.
Right.
And if you put it here, you need a corridor to get in. So in both cases, you lose this interior space. There's no sense in putting an exterior one on if you're going to lose that space anyway, and it's
Right.
going to be less expensive. And I think one of the things that might help out with this whole space issue is taking this all the way to the basement. You have to build the structure all the way to the basement anyway. Having an outlet there, another floor stop, allows your janitorial staff to be able to service all the floors more easily. And second of all, you have a lot of space in that basement that could be retrofitted for additional office space.
Our goal here is hopefully, depending on the costs and
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, construction problems, we want to access the basement. There's some small offices down there, like the Shellfish Commissioners, for instance, that don't really have public access, but they do have office space down there. This would allow for them to have some public if they had to, and there's a lot of storage and stuff down there, so.
And really quickly, the elevators have to have overrun space, so it has to actually stick up above the second floor about 4 feet. So you need a little box out that would stick out. This would be option B, and this would be option A. Very minor. Again, on the back side, they're not on the street side, so in terms of impact historically, it would be very, very minimal if those were interior. And by the time you're done, you'd really have to look to notice that they were there. So I think the point of our presentation is that, in 1 hour, we've spent the time going through. This is our initial analysis. Obviously, if we were awarded the project, we would have measured drawings and be able to have the scale of the elevators and the lobbies. The reason you have to have an interior lobby is the code will not allow you to open an elevator directly into this stair. So it's just one more door. And knowing that, I think, is important. Hopefully we're, at every moment we're differentiating ourselves from our competition. But we've looked at that, and I think it's a very logical thing. Again, the logic is if you're going to lose this space anyway, an exterior elevator doesn't make sense. If you put it in the back here, you lose all this storage, and you lose more space here than you do in these two. If you put it on this edge, you could cut out a corridor and leave all. It just doesn't. By the time our gut is that, based on our experiences, that's going to be more expensive and lose more space.
Yeah, I don't think that we're not leaning towards that just because it'll break up the Council on Aging space, and it's just it keeps it far away from the stairways too. Just one question on this in this location now. Is this able to be put in at the same time maintaining the current, because we need to maintain the current ramp structure until the elevator is complete?
I'm sure that they could work that out because
We
the
can't
main
shut the building down, and we have to have some.
the main issue is getting this shaft in,
Right.
and you can cordon this off while this is still in operation. That's really not a problem. So that was you asked us to give you
Yes,
our thoughts.
very good.
Those are our thoughts. That's our experience. You have questions
Yeah,
for
we've
us?
got a number of questions.
Shoot.
Obviously, an issue is the internal-external elevator addition, and how much experience it appears as though, from what you've given us, you've got a lot of experience in both areas,
Yes, we
as
do.
well as historical and municipal buildings. So maybe you could expound a little more on the difficulties, and you look at the building over there, regards to costs or difficulties that we did, particularly in general cost ratios of an external versus an internal elevator. That's what one of our big concerns is.
Do you want to do
We have
that?
CPC funds, but we want to be cost efficient as well as aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, so maybe I'll hit on a couple of bullet points that, we do have this, the pros and cons list in your handout as
Right.
well.
Let's go through it.
So,
Yeah, if that'd be good.
Let's go through it.
okay. So interior elevator, pros are the new shaft improves structural performance of the building. So typically, if you're making a hole in the floor, in the building diaphragm, you want to be concerned about that. But really, we're going to be building a new CMU shaft all the way up, and so if anything, we're at the very least mitigating the fact that we're putting a hole in the floor and we're stabilizing the structure. I understand that there's been structural issues at the building in the past.
So you're not, in other words, you're not putting a lot of stress on the building is.
No, if
Those-
anything, it's a pro. We're going to be stabilizing it.
You're
Many
creating-
years ago, there
yeah.
was a concern. They talked about maybe putting a library in there or something. It was the bulge. The bulge kind of. Effect.
Well, if you're going to put a library in, that's a whole different
Yeah,
project.
Exactly,
And-
but I'm just saying.
And as
I think that's where we're coming
with
up
structural
with.
engineers on staff, we have actually dealt with that on more than one building, and more than one library, having to come after the fact to buildings where the structural engineer didn't actually consider the weight of the books, which is bizarre.
Yeah, we're not getting into that, but just.
But
yeah.
imagine if you got a wood frame building and now you put in a concrete block post that's going to keep the whole building from moving laterally in the wind. That's the advantage of that sort of a structural element that's added.
Okay.
Some other pros is as these options show, that it's close to the interior spaces and services, so you're not carving out a really long corridor to get to the exterior. You're putting it in close proximity. And lastly, there's little to no change to the exterior, as we've shown in these aerial views of the building. These have really minimal impact, and we've located on the side of the building that's away from the busiest streets. Some cons is there is still some loss of interior space, regardless, unless, if the building was arranged differently, we could have less, but we feel that these two options have very little loss of interior space. Interior elevator cons, disruptive to the interior spaces and services. I think that's a given no matter what, where we need to mitigate that disruption to the greatest extent possible. Interior elevator, that's something that's going to do more so than an exterior elevator, regardless, because you are inside the building, just a given. And because of that, it becomes more expensive The contractor owns temporary, owns making the building safe and secure, and so the contractor's going to have some additional allowances there.
For dust control and...
Maintain egress.
Right.
Right.
As you just said,
Right,
with
right.
the ramp.
Okay.
Yep. It's also intensive MEP work. We need to extend the utilities. We also, for
What
both
is it?
of
What
these,
is MEP work?
Mechanical, electrical, and
Okay.
plumbing work.
Thank
So especially with the electrical, we need to assess whether there's enough power at the building to support a new elevator. If it means bringing new service to the building.
And in this example, for example, you've got to deal with all the plumbing that exists in this location.
Right.
So you'd have to head it off and make sure that it's all safe and rerouted before you install that.
Yep. So there's a lot of workarounds
Right.
for an interior elevator, and that becomes less cost
It's like
effective.
it's like building a big dig.
Yeah.
True.
Versus a new highway going around
Yep.
128.
True.
A little dig. But in either case, you're going to be digging, you're going to be excavating.
Right.
On the outside, you would limit that to the exterior, so there's less impact. So I don't know if you want to discuss the
Well,
exterior.
is it, just one quick question in regards to that, now, is it, if we're gonna put something to the basement,
Mhm.
but obviously if you're doing an interior elevator, the space is already kind of allocated in the basement.
Mhm.
So if we do out an exterior, it's gonna be additional costs going through, I don't know, there's a granite walls over there or whatever. I think they are granite block walls.
Yeah, it is a stone.
Yeah,
It is a
stone.
stone foundation, correct. Right. Not technically difficult, it's just a cost
Right.
to do it, underpinning and temporarily shoring the building while you make that hole, put in the lintels. It's,
Right,
again,
right.
we have the structural engineers to do that very
Okay.
easily, but it is additional cost.
okay.
So when you go to the exterior options, the pros are, it really is easier to build because it's on the exterior. You're not disrupting the interior. It's faster. They put up their staging and it goes very quickly. You only have to really break through at the end, so you can minimize the dust and disruption on the inside until that very end. So there's less disturbance to the interior. Sometimes, and depending on where you envision a second elevator, you have a potential second handicap entrance. In this case, I'm not sure that would be the case. If you're going to put an elevator back here, you'd still need a ramp to get to the first level over here. Less disturbance to mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, less structural modifications as typically in comparison to the interior. Cons are, if the elevator is here or here, it's not that much farther away, but compared to here, having it on the exterior is farther away. Sometimes if you have, for example, we said if you had an elevator here, you'd have to have a corridor to get to it. So that's a con. Sometimes if you don't have mechanical space on the interior, if you don't have access to an interior space, you need room for a mechanical room. Sometimes those go on the outside as well. Changes the exterior of the building, working with the historic view of the building, that's a con. And again, there's additional site work. So those are why those are the reasons you would do one or the other. I think based on what we've seen so far, if you have to lose some bit of interior space anyway, and it's roughly the same for each, the inside might be less expensive. But I think our point in this process is our job is to give you the options, including the costs. So we will look at both options and tell you how much it costs. We might say if it's significantly less expensive on the outside, and you're losing the same amount of space, you might say, well, I'm willing to have the exterior modified a bit if we're going to save that amount of money. So,
Okay.
The other thing when you're talking about the budget and the cost, I don't know if you've looked into Mass Historic grants or some other grants, but Mass Historic has matching funding.
We've discussed that informally, if that's a possibility to fit in this project schedule.
on that.
Yep.
How was your experience with Mass Historic?
Good. Always positive.
The only downside to Mass Historic is that they own you they are now in charge of your building, and
Preservation restriction.
preservation restriction, And the problem is these days they're only giving out like $50,000. To get $50,000, the amount of work that we have to do and that your administrators have to do, I'm not sure it's worth it. So it's really a big
Well,
decision.
we've had a couple of other, not building projects, but working with DEP or Parks and Rec, whatever they call it at the state level. We actually turned down the state money because of the numbers of restrictions, and they want to get their fingers into every little thing you do. So we're talking about it, but it's obviously should be in the mix. But for the small amount of money and the possibility that you put a lot of time and effort in and don't come up with much is kind of like it's definitely a downer in terms of doing it. But we definitely would take a look at it.
Okay.
Natalie, Debbie, you
Could you talk a little bit about what building upgrades you think may be triggered as a result of this project?
Well, we were thinking about bringing that up sooner, but we expected this to come up during discussions. We have a lot of work to build smaller buildings like this that we have to look at the accessibility triggers. That's one of the code triggers. If you're spending over $100,000, then you're required to make sure that the building has an accessible route to the main entrance, accessible bathrooms, drinking fountain. I didn't see a drinking fountain in the building. If there is a drinking fountain, one needs to be accessible. And if there's a public payphone, that needs to be accessible as well. So I don't think the payphone...
don't have either one of those in there currently.
The bigger thing that's been coming up a lot lately on numerous projects on smaller buildings is the 30% trigger. So when you look at the assessed value of the building, if you're going over 30% of that assessed value, then the entire building needs to be accessible,
Right.
fully accessible. That means signage, controls,
Bathrooms.
door hardware throughout the building.
Counters.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things we want to do
Of
Right.
course.
Eventually.
Yeah. So that's one of the big code triggers there
Okay.
that I could see possibly because of the size of the building. I'm not sure what the assessed value is, but if you're going to be spending $300,000 and it's valued at $1 million, you might be.
We control the assessment, so.
Correct.
Yep.
And Steve's just done that. We had 2 schools for the MSBA that Stoughton and New Bedford, they kept the assessment down very low for their own internal reasons, but exceeded the threshold with our project. They increased the assessed value, and then it was no longer an issue. One was able to do it, one was not. So,
A few years back, the Housing Authority did that.
right.
Because normally we keep our buildings, relatively low. It
course.
doesn't make much
Yeah.
difference, I don't think. I don't know how it works on the assessment for the community, but.
That's the majority. That's the number one issue, and then anything else that life safety, which we usually work hand in hand with the building inspector. We work with all public officials based on your direction, but at the same time, we have to make sure that the life safety issues are up to speed as well, and how that triggers it.
Could you give us some examples of the life safety?
Well, fire alarm
Okay.
is the number one. I don't think this triggers the need for sprinklers. I think that's
You
beyond
don't
the
think
scope.
so?
of- No.
Okay.
How much you've experienced, you sound like you got a lot of experience, obviously, like CPC funding is limited to handicap related. In this particular case, I mean, we could, some of the rooms, if we wanted to, we make them historical, we might pay, in other words, the funding isn't, we have CPC funding, we assume. If the prices come in reasonably, then we can build the elevator. But at the other hand, if you've been to the building, to use the rest of that building and bring it up to date with, whether it's sprinklers or plumbing or those, how much of those do you think, or has your experience shown that we can
With CPC,
put under the handicap, under the umbrella of the CPC funding for?
every town is a little bit different because there are some gray areas with the way the CPC funding is allowed. An example, I don't know that, one example of the CPC in some of the towns we work with is they won't fund regular maintenance items.
Right.
This is an example.
Yeah, we don't either.
But that's kind of a gray area, if
Right.
you could make a point, well, you should have been painting your building, maintaining it that way. We're not going to pay for any painting work. So I guess that's a discussion with the CPC
Roofing is a
specifically.
big one too. Some towns will do roofing, other towns
Yeah.
won't touch it. Now, bathrooms, I assume, would be to create a handicap bathroom, I would assume would be covered.
Well, under the CPC, so this would be under the historic, because there's three, right? There's open space, housing, historic. Historic gets 10% of the minimum of the funding,
Yes.
so.
Yeah, so, for example, you had mentioned, that, this 30% trigger where maybe you have to kind of go in and look at everything to make sure the doorknobs and the entryways and counters and things are, meet, the handicap accessibility requirements. So part of that would be a restroom that would be handicap accessible in a historic building. Part of this, what we're seeing here is the elevator, is one project, but could trigger several upgrades for handicap accessibility to a historic building, and we're thinking of it as really
The same
part of the
project.
inclusive of, it's inclusive of the project. The elevator
related.
project
Because the project's triggering those.
is
requirements.
in handicap accessibility in historic buildings, is, my understanding, is a qualifying expense under the Community Preservation Act,
Yeah.
under that heading of historic. Is that what you find in other municipalities when you do
I
this?
think we agree with you, but there are potentially
Mhm.
some municipalities who maybe haven't done that.
Okay.
Maybe have taken a different stance. Coming back to a similar example, but the MSBA, we do work with the MSBA on a
Mhm.
regular basis with these accelerated repair programs. Last year, they've decided to stop reimbursing for any work that's triggered by the 30%. So that's new. They've gone a little bit back and forth over the years. So up until last year, they would contribute. And last year, they decided they would stop.
We did a study of 8 buildings in Barnstable, 8 historic buildings, and the work that was related to the historic restoration was very, very liberally interpreted by their town. So I think it's a town-by-town issue.
Yeah, a lot of it's gonna be a selling,
But I think,
how we sell it, or how we present it to the.
but we like to say when it's triggered by the one, they're related. You can't
That's what I'm saying.
not
Yeah.
do the project, so.
We could have an elevator and not have the accessibility that we need, that the State Architectural Access Board may find is, in violation of the rules, and then not be able to use the building.
Yeah.
Because it didn't meet all those requirements for handicap accessibility.
Yeah, it goes back to, you want to maintain this building, back to the historic preservation side of it. You got to get this work done so the viability of the building continues into the future and continues to be used by the town. Otherwise, you could possibly vacate it. That would be the worst case scenario, but.
Yeah.
And then you'd lose it, and
We've just spent a lot of CPC money on the exterior. If you'd notice, the exterior's been
Yes,
re-sided
yeah.
and so on and so forth. So it's really a combination of the two. And because in other words, we're looking at a situation beyond this. We've just passed an override for a new police and fire station for $11.5 million.
wow.
We're currently looking at, dealing with a MSBA on upgrading our elementary school, not expanding, but, so that's probably gonna be I'm guessing $10 or $12 million. They're gonna give us 50% back, but, so what we're looking at from our perspective here in this committee is that we've already indebted ourselves for some large projects, so that when we get beyond the CPC funding, which is, more or less gonna be available, I don't anticipate that'll be a major problem, is if we need more money for
Right.
other things, how are we gonna, because taxpayers are gonna be going, wait a minute. Plus, last year, a couple of years back, we built a $12 million water treatment facility. So, I mean, it's just been one thing after another.
Well, it
But
is.
We need this space. We're desperate for this space, for the space in that building that's available if we can get this project off the ground and running.
And it's
Sure.
not just the town hall annex, it is the senior center. And part
Correct.
of the goal of the accessibility project here is to make that much more user-friendly, expand it so that there can be greater accommodation and more services, because that's a population in the town that actually is growing rapidly, and so when we look at this historic building, which is the town hall annex with a lot of municipal offices in there and a senior center, we're looking at it and saying the restrooms, yes, there's certain features of the senior center that need to be in compliance for people that may have disabilities that are trying to enter and exit out of that building properly and use it to the maximum capacity that it should have.
So one of the advantages of this particular option is it leaves the 4 bathrooms available to be bathrooms, which you really do need, especially if you're going to expand that senior center option and fill up the building. You really need more than just 1 operating bathroom. You need those 4, and I think that'll serve you.
Yeah, we've heard that there's oftentimes a line waiting out in the hallway.
Yes.
For people to use them.
It can be, yeah.
Yes, on certain days when there's a lot of events there, we have employees there, we have members of the public
Sure.
that are popping into the building inspector or to the conservation agent. So it's a busy building.
We absolutely need 1 additional one anyway. And then, depending on the placement of the elevator, because at one time I think there probably was 4.
There-
Well, so
yeah.
it used to be in the old days, it used to be bathrooms in the basement.
Yep.
You can, if you go down there, you can still see the doors.
Yep,
with
I've
the-
seen
And you still could do that.
you can still do that.
With an elevator, you'll still be able to do that.
With the plumbing already kind of
Of
set
course,
in there.
of course.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Could you talk a little bit more about the team that we would be working with? Would we be working mostly with Steven on this?
Yeah, Steve is the project manager and the project architect. I like working with Steve because he's very accessible and very responsive. Our clients really like the way he gets back to them, and there's no question about answering questions and being in communication and in relationship during the project. As I said, we have our in-house structural engineers. We're using, who do we have for MEP?
We have BLW.
BLW engineers who we work with all the time for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And those really are our main, here, right here in the front. Code Red is our code consultant. Civil engineering, niche engineering, if we ever do need any civil engineering, and ATC for hazardous material testing. We want to make sure before we start we know what the issues are in terms of hazardous material, because if the contractor gets in there and sees something, then you're stopped and there's change orders, and we don't like change orders.
For sure.
And PM&C is our cost estimator for the project. We like working with PM&C because not only are they estimators, they're construction managers, so they sit on your side of the table. They know your issues. We do the same. We do a little bit of OPM work, so we understand the client's concerns for budget and schedule. But for cost estimating, we do 3 other things. We have projects going on now that we're getting bids for. And now, therefore, we know what the market prices are for elevators, for masonry, for siding, for demo. We're also not adverse to having contractors come by and say, what do you think about this project? What do you see? Because contractors see the work in a different way. It's often, how do I mobilize? Where do I put my stuff? How do I get into the space? And how many people am I going to disrupt? And finally, you have to temper this work according to the bidding climate and location. So you're not Boston, but we are in a very busy market right now. Prices are really high. This is not 2010 anymore, okay? We were really doing well in 2010. But now everybody's busy, so prices are up. And when we do our estimates, you'll see that reflected, because it doesn't serve you if we're not realistic in our pricing.
So in the projects you people have been doing, you're coming in pretty much in line, the construction costs are pretty much with what you're estimating?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're always within about 5%. Part of it, too, is that we'll do test cuts. We'll actually open up walls to see what's there. We have the engineers come out and really crawl through the space. As Steve said, if you don't have enough electricity in the building, that's a huge item. That's the first thing we find out about, because if we had to bring in a new service, it would be an additional cost. How do you get the electricity from here to the panel? There's panels all over the place, but I noticed there's panels in this back corner. If you have to run the electricity from here to here, that's something we have to tell the contractors so they understand that, because there's a big cost to that. Plus, we may want it run in a certain way. If we're going to reuse those spaces, we just don't want them to pick a spot. We might want it in a soffit so that you don't see it, or run in a way that we can enclose it later. So.
And we, getting back to the team, we involved the entire team with from the very beginning stages. So if we were looking at these two options, or maybe there's a third, or maybe there's a fourth after meeting with the town, then we involve all of our contractors. If it takes us from one corner of the building to the other to bring the service, are we going to be coring through walls or through floors? Is there asbestos tile? How much abatement do we expect? And all of that needs to go into some preliminary budget figures before we develop it more detailed.
So getting back to your question, Steve's the main point of contact. Will you ever see me again? No. Yes, you will. You may see me again, but where you won't see me, but where I will be, is on quality control. Because every one of the projects in this office comes across my desk, and I act like the slippery public bid contractor. And I look at our plans and I say, there's a big hole here. We need to tighten this up. Or we don't show where this goes, the electricity comes from here to here. We don't show this or that. And by the time we're done, we've tightened up the scope so that hopefully in the end, there's very little in the way of change orders. By doing that investigation at the beginning, as Steve said, we get the whole team to the site looking at all those issues. During bidding, we vet the contractors. We try to find references that aren't on their update statement. We try to ask other towns and other contractors who've worked with them how they've done. And we try to see if the town is willing to, in some cases, disqualify unqualified contractors, and we just did this. We did it up in Newburyport 3 months ago. A contractor that we'd been working with in Tewksbury was doing a terrible job, was torturing us for months, wouldn't finish the job. Quality was terrible, and we said, fine, we're not using you on this new job. And we got Newburyport to disqualify them. It's huge. Luckily the second bid wasn't too far behind, but we knew that if we used them, it would be just such a headache for all concerned. And then finally, during construction, we have to monitor the work. We normally have weekly job meetings. Our job is to be there and to look at, this is a different kind than the fence job that we did together. When you're doing a building construction job, you have to be there every week. And it's where it gets built slowly, like peeling an onion, and we see it layer by layer and go in. We answer questions, we approve invoices, we push back. A lot of contractors will try to get away with things. I think for the most part, most of them are good. But sometimes, for financial reasons, they're going to push you. And we push back. Because if it's in the drawings and we own it, we own it. And we're going to insist that it happen. And if they don't want to do it, we're certainly not going to pay for it. And that's part of the checks and balances that we bring in terms of value to oversight of the project.
What is the contractor market out there for elevator projects like this? In other words, is there a lot of vendors that put in elevators, or is it just a few, or how do you find that when you're doing elevators?
Might get a half dozen. There's...
Well, Steve's doing elevator retrofits in Brookline. He's finished 2. He's doing 2 more right now. Those are just updates. But you have vendors that are about a half a dozen vendors that bid. There's 2 parts.
And this is filed sub-bid, so this is likely, most elevators are always involving filed sub-bids, and electrical and elevator. Okay. So you can have elevator subcontractors, you can have mason subcontractor, filed sub-bidder. But I find it's been good. We've been getting at least 3. Mm-hmm. That's what you want, because you don't want one bidder who just threw a number in and it comes back high.
Yep.
So a lot of times we'll make phone calls to these vendors. We'll call United Elevator, just say, hey, we saw you weren't on the plan holders list.
Yeah.
Did you notice this project was out there?
We want a GC to handle the overall project, mm-hmm. because they have to coordinate that. Right. None of those file sub-bidders are good at being the GC. Right. You need a GC to coordinate it.
You want them to show up on the GC calls and tells them to be there.
And then they coordinate it, and we'll have the file submitters for each one of those, no problem.
Okay. Debbie, you got anything else on that?
And based on your vast experience here with working with elevators and historical buildings, do you have any examples maybe of where you were working on a project and there was a deficiency that came up and how you resolved that?
Let's see. I don't like to dwell on those. No, just kidding.
You know, just
mean,
something that would be common in a historic building that you know, it's like having an operation and you
Well,
don't know what you're gonna find when you start opening up the,
Right.
It's
the
the
walls in these historic buildings.
It's the rotted wood that you
Yeah.
mostly find. I
Okay.
mean, as
That's
we
what
said,
I'm thinking.
we'll do test cuts. We'll actually
Mhm.
open up the finish where we're going to be
Mhm.
working, so we can see the condition of the
Mhm.
material. But a lot of times, the sill that's sitting on top of the stone is going to be rotted.
Mhm.
If we know about it in advance, we carry it as a unit cost. So if we know it's 5 feet, we say carry 5 feet, but give us a unit price for every additional foot, and then
Right,
we
that's the-
we nail down that cost in advance, and there's no haggling about it.
Because we can't open up every single condition. That's where
Right.
the unit prices come into play, and that's why they were going.
So the
And then-
team that you referred to earlier, it's the team that's, you know, cutting open the wall and looking in, and your circle of people that are going to be part of this will be doing this evaluation as you prepare the bid documents and the specifications for the work. 'Cause you'll already have identified some of these potential issues, which could be areas of rotted wood, or
Yep.
or maybe a beam needs to be replaced, a structural
Some
beam.
sills have had some termite damage. Or,
Right.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's impossible to know whether or not there's a ledge in the one place where we're going to dig for a pit, but we would ask you in town, is there much ledge? Right. The building inspector usually knows. Are there groundwater issues in the area? We want to know that in advance, and we'll ask
Yep.
that. I know we did a elevator, a lift in Lawrence for the Lawrence Public Schools that was super. We found 2 janitor's closets that weren't being used, and it was next to a stair. It was a perfect location to create a shaft, and there were a couple electrical change orders because some of the things that they looked at and it showed being one way, when they opened it up it was different. So you can't, as Steve says, you can't open up everything, but you have to ask enough questions to know that there are issues, normal issues, and then the unforeseen, it's kind of hard to.
So it sounds like your team pretty much comprehensively looks at the building as a group and finds, whether it's actually sees them or talking to the building inspector or talking to occupants or whatever, what the problems are before you jump in with both feet.
As much as we can.
I think you're going to find that as a common answer among architects, but I think the one thing that we do particularly well is identify them up front. We really want to do ask all those questions from the very beginning. When the first day we sit down with you and go to the on-site, we want to be asking all those questions.
Yeah, I've talked with the president of a fairly prominent architectural firm in Boston, and he shakes his head. He says, "Look, we're really good with the new stuff. As soon as we start touching the old buildings, that's when we get into trouble." And you know, that's all we do. We deal with existing buildings. We're not doing, I mean, to the extent of a new shaft, we'll do, but we're not doing additions. So dealing with the existing structure is how, you know, the con of going inside is who knows what's running in the floor above here. When we were working at Harvard, you know what's there? All their fiber optics. It's like everything is there. It's like a bullseye. So.
And then just some of the things that you don't normally think about. You're touching a wall. You're going to repaint the entire room on the inside. So you're cutting a wall open, you're going to be doing some finish damage. You don't, I mean, when we finish this job, you don't want to come back and say, why didn't we paint this this room?
Right. Too many times they'll have a door here, a new door, and it'll say patch to match. That's a typical architect note. But when you're done, you really need to paint from that corner to that corner, or else you're not done, and you won't be satisfied. So that's what we bring to the table.
Okay, good. Anything else, Natalie?
No?
And Debbie?
No.
Very good. Enjoyed the presentation. Anything
Thank
you guys would like to ask us or say in closing?
Simply that, again, this is in our bailiwick. This is what we like to do. We enjoy our work, and and we're very successful. We invite you to call our references, call the folks, the municipalities
Can
that
we
we...
find some that you didn't put on the reference list?
Absolutely not. Yeah, they're all on this list. They're all there.
I mean, you kind of tossed that up. That's why I figured I'd toss it back in your lap. You know?
Fair enough, fair enough. So,
Well, if you're all
we'd
set.
love to work for you,
Okay.
so thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
in. We appreciate your presentation
Yeah,
and
nice to
talking
meet
to you.
you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you.
Nice to meet you.
Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
I know you have a lot of experience there. Every time I worked with Natalie in Salem, she was having a baby.
She's been great since she come to
Yes.
Raleigh and doing a lot of work for us. We're gonna miss her the time she's gone. We're hoping she won't be gone too long, and maybe the new baby can be one of the first ones to ride in the elevator.
That's right. That's great.
Ribbon cutting.
All right, thank you very much
Thank
for
you
coming.
very
Good
much.
luck.
Thank
Yep, take care now, bye-bye. Well.
Okay, the first category, experience designing accessibility improvements for historic municipal buildings, I would say excellent.
It's gonna be hard to find anybody that's
That's- well, they
done
do.
any more.
That's 100% of their firm.
Comprehension of the work plan, once again, I think they did some homework, they went over and, spent some time in the building, talked to a number of different people, talked to the building inspector, which was kind of impressive, actually. But, they seem to have a pretty good, an excellent comprehension of what we're looking to do and an understanding of, what our needs are.
Yeah, I mean, I think because of their vast work experience, based on that list of projects, I'd say they fully understand what they're gonna get involved with in a historic building when they undertake a project like this. So I would say that's excellent.
Yeah, I would agree. Natalie, anything? You wanna
I
add?
agree. They seem to have a good understanding of what the issues might be, and
And I really like the idea, they really emphasize the pre-work they do.
Yes.
Coming in and looking at the building and trying to anticipate. I mean, they really emphasize that. I mean, everybody, I'm sure, all the firms do that, but they seem to really put an emphasis on the fact that they bring a team in, all the different groupings, to really get a handle on what the building's issues and problems might be. I thought that was very good.
Yeah, the project team, I mean, he had the MEP, Code Red, Civil Engineering, PMC, cost estimating, materials, ATC hazardous materials testing, all these things that you have to do, just for even simple projects, you have to get some testing done on different things. And then on occasion bringing in a contractor to just, give a general sense, of things that could come up in logistics and staging and other things, as part of that work to be done to come up with the scope of services and the cost and everything else for the bid documents, and what are we really looking at, and eliminate any change orders down the road that could stall everything.
yeah, I think they were the first group that had touched upon hazardous materials and looking into that as well.
That's the first we heard of that,
Because that can
actually.
be very expensive
Yes,
if you
uh-huh.
encounter
Yes.
it.
Get into the asbestos and things like that.
Just did that.
Roads are unbelievable. Now, you said you worked with them before in Salem?
I have worked with them before a couple times. Not on a construction project,
Right.
on a building.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fence restoration.
So in terms of experience of personnel assigned to the project, so you had, in your prior life, they've responded well to any issues you had. Understanding it was a different kind of a project, but
Yeah, I'd say that they're very knowledgeable. I've never worked with Steve before,
Right.
but he seemed, I thought he seemed
he was very,
to be,
I don't know what the right word is, but his charisma or whatever was such that he looks like he would be an easy person to work with.
yeah.
And then they did emphasize the fact too that, in other words, they're there for us. They're gonna design the project, make sure it's built correctly, that they get the proper bidding, so the experience of the personnel assigned to the project seems to be extensive. And they seem to make all the right moves as far as, making us feel like they're really gonna work on our behalf. And they're upfront about the cost. I think the costs are gonna be the big thing as we get into this. Anything else,
Yeah.
Debbie, on that one?
I would say the experience of the personnel assigned to this project would be excellent, only because with Steve Watchorn, it seems like this is what he does, is working on historic buildings, elevators and other related projects, but it's historic buildings. That's his background.
I also get the impression that where he's on the historic in his community,
Yes.
that he would be a help on the inside of the building in terms of
Mhm.
looking at what we need to do
Mhm.
inside and
Mhm.
hopefully putting that into the historic perspective so that we can be able to get some funding in relation to those types of issues. I was impressed. Presentation, like the others, I think they did an excellent job. They've done their homework, they've got drawings, they got,
Mhm.
the
Two options.
options, and
Mhm.
they took aerial pictures. I thought they did an excellent job of,
Helping us visualize potentially
Yeah.
where it would be, what it would look like, logistical reasons why you wouldn't put it in a different location, how, it needs to be integrated into the building, and the other firms did bring up that as well. So I have to say, I think it was an excellent.
yeah, I think in that regard, all three firms did a
Yeah.
nice job in the presentation. I'm kind of excited
They did.
about the project as a result of
Yeah.
talking to these three.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not the one that does all the paperwork, but, it's wonderful to see this kind of coming into perspective finally after a lot of years of talking about it. But yeah, they were excellent, so. With that in mind, we're looking to rank them, Debbie, now based on that.
Yes, so now in accordance with the RFQ, our group here is required to then rank these three firms and present the finalists to the Board of Selectmen so that they can negotiate the contract. They're the
Right.
contract awarding authority.
So you want to start, Debbie, only because you're
So,
you're kind of the expert in this area.
So what we're looking at in terms of ranking these firms, and we all have our paperwork here, looking at the criteria of prior similar experience, past performance on public and private projects, financial stability of the firm, identity and qualifications of the consultants who will work with the applicants on the project, and any other criteria that the committee considers relevant to the project. So we're kind of looking at, as we're talking about, the prior similar experience to what we have here for our project, then their past performance, financial stability of the firm, and then the consultant's qualities.
Mm-hmm. 30 years of experience that this CPI has. listed in their booklet.
So I would say, if we're looking at prior similar experience, I would have to say that, I think CBI would be the top rank.
Yes, I would
Um,
agree. Yeah, I don't think there's any question that they've got, I mean, they
Mhm.
specialize
Yeah,
in historic buildings, number one. They don't get involved in big
mhm,
additional projects. Their expertise and has been for 30 years, and the list they gave us is just, it's be hard pressed to find anybody that's done more work, I think, at least surely in this area.
Yeah.
So I would have to, you know, and, I mean, all the firms did an excellent job of presentation. They all had good ideas. You know, much of the information is the same for each one of them. And I think at this point, I think, you know, I would have to say that CBI would be my number one choice based on the historical experience they've got, the amount of elevator work they've done, both internal and external.
mhm.
And they just made a great presentation on the pre-work that they'll do to, and I'm not saying anything, that doesn't say anything against it, what anybody else said, but they did, they were impressive, and I think their experience, to me anyway, kind of says it all.
And I would rank GNAP as, you know, second on that.
Yeah, I
Yep.
agree. Yeah, Corral Group, we worked with them before with the police and fire. They were great to work with. It's a great company, but they just don't have the experience in elevators, in historic buildings, and
In comparison to these
in
two
comparison
firms.
to the other two people. I mean, I don't think there'd be any
Mhm.
problem working with them.
Sure.
But I think, yeah, I think if CBI would be number one in my book, GNAP, and then the Corral Group in that order.
And then past performance on public and private projects. I know that we did, Natalie, you did a lot of work earlier on in this evaluation process. And how did you find some of the contacts you've had with these three firms in regard to their past performance?
They all had very positive references. Just look through to. With GNAP design, most people had worked directly with Dale GNAP, and they thought that he had a really good management style and was easy to work with. We were happy with the results. CBI also had really positive reviews. One project they had worked mostly with Michael Teller, but then there were a couple others that had worked with other architects on their team, but not Steve.
Okay.
So I don't have any references directly for him. They also described them as being kind of, laid back but forceful with contractors when needed to be, which I think
Mhm.
Michael kind of had touched upon, as they'll push the contractors if they need to. And with the Carell Group, most people had worked directly with Greg Carell, and they were really happy with how responsive he was and the product.
So maybe in a case like this, then knowing that you had an example of a reference that commented on the fact that they were dealing directly with the owner and the principal of the firm, kind of makes me feel that in this category and past performance, based on what we have here, that maybe GNAP ranks first in this particular category, knowing that we have some testimony regarding having a very good experience in working with the owner of that firm. And then CBI and Corel Group would be tied for second or second and third. What does the board feel?
Yeah, it's hard to say. In other words, CBI is the biggest firm of the three. So you're gonna get the people that are doing their projects are gonna have a little less personal contact. I just looked at Steve's, he's got 7 years with this firm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like he came in yesterday. And, obviously they get a lot of projects going, and there are gonna be different people assigned to each project, so. It's, without finding any negative comments, I kinda like CBI. I think they just seem to have the most experience in what we're looking for. It seems like they're tailor-made for what we want. And GNAP is a close second. I like they're a little closer ties to home, but I'm not sure that, overcomes just because they're close by. I don't know.
Were there any other comments from GNAP that mentioned speaking to the owner, Dale GNAP, or just having that type of relationship during the project with the principal?
Let's see. So I spoke with Joseph Hart from the Haverhill Housing Authority, and that's a project involving an interior elevator addition that's ongoing right now. Actually, it's just out to bid. Actually, he did say that he's worked mostly with Dale Gienap, but I guess there was some turnover of other architects that were working on the project, so there were a few times when it was confusing to know who exactly he should be calling. But he described Dale's management style as steady. Let's see what else. John Lyons from Middlesex Community College said that he's worked with Gienap Design on a multitude of projects. And he spoke about Dale's management style as being very detail-oriented, that he has a great memory, he's really easy to work with, and he's amazed at how knowledgeable he was. So he had a really glowing reference for him. And the third reference was from Chief Hazelwood from the town of Oxford. That was on their Lincoln Hall project. And he said that Dale was very sensitive to listening to people and attentive to the project. He also said that when there were issues with the project, that because he was so local, he could stop by and kind of help them work through the issues immediately.
So that's very difficult on that.
Yeah, no, it's.
Yeah.
It sounds like, that the three firms are very good, and it seems like they've got, based on, and we've been doing a lot of work on this past couple of, the past month or so on this whole project. I would say that all the performance has worked out well for all of these projects, and that, excuse me.
Are you in?
Yeah, we're in a meeting right now that's,
apologize.
sorry. So that, I think in this case, it's very difficult to evaluate, but looking at the number of projects that related to what we're looking to do here, that the performance category would tip to CBI, because these are all projects that are so similar, and since the performance comments have come back so high and positive for all three firms, I think in that particular category, it's probably, is justified to say that CBI would be the top rank in that category, if the board agrees.
No, I would agree.
Yeah, I would say they were all practically equal, just given that CBI has the more experience of related projects, that they would come in first.
And then the financial stability of the firm, that's in that, it's all been listed here in the evaluation form that were required under the designer selection procedures that all three firms have provided us. And I think, I have to say, I think that they were all seem to be financially
Didn't think there'd
solvent.
be any financial issues with any of them.
Right, with any of them, that's right.
I don't think any of them listed any pending litigation or any of those kinds of issues that might have an effect on it.
I think CBI said that they had one.
Yes, they did, they have to provide that disclosure,
Right.
so it's a insurance subrogation and then a personal injury claim by a third party.
Oh,
It's a subrogation on insurance. So it's not, they're not liability issues here.
okay.
So that was their insurance claims. Identity and qualifications of the consultants who will work with the applicants on the project. Any comments on that one?
Give me these again.
This is the identity and qualification of the consultants who will work with the applicants on the project.
Yeah. I thought CBI had great qualifications. GNAP design also was very good. We didn't meet with the project manager. He wasn't able to come. I'm sure we could probably pull up see in their RFP remind ourselves what his qualifications were. It was Mike Nee, who on page 33 there's a resume.
Okay. He seems to have a good background.
It looks as though he's worked as an architect since '95.
He has a
And-
bachelor's in in architecture, and it does look like, when I look at Steve Watchhorn, he has a master's degree in architecture. Of course, along with a bachelor's in architecture. It's based on the form here. So, in terms of project
Yes,
managers, though,
He's newly registered
yeah,
as an architect. We don't have a date on Michael Nate.
Well, it sounds like based on the information, it's probably pretty much equal, right, as far as?
yeah, it
Doesn't seem to
seems
be too much to
the
differentiate between one and the other.
Yeah, they're
the-
both registered.
They're both registered, and Mr. Nee does seem to have a little bit more work experience.
But not necessarily
Right.
elevator experience.
That's right.
Which
Just
Yeah.
Steve Watchhorn did.
design and construction work in some historical buildings, but I'm just not seeing any elevator. But And on Steve Watchhorn's resume, he says town hall and physical education building elevator upgrades in Brookline, Mass. Amos, Lawrence, and Pierce Schools elevator upgrades, Brookline, Mass. So he does seem to have some, really a focus more on the elevator aspect of historic restoration and renovations. So, how do we feel then about the qualifications then and the consultants who are being brought together in these teams? I think with the focus on our highest ranked here, CBI and GNAP, how do we feel about that category?
Well, CBI kind of specializes in elevators and historic buildings. I mean, it's kind of hard to, unless you find something negative, it's kind of hard not to rank them near the top. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with the others, but just.
So CBI, GNAP, and then the Corel Group.
Right.
Okay. So any other qualifications that you would enter into this at this point? Or should we look at just making the final ranking overall?
Yeah, I have nothing else. I mean, like I say, I was impressed by all three groups.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of really experience in historical, history of working with historical buildings and elevator projects and not getting any negative feedback on any of the firms. And they all seem to have well-qualified people. And kind of tough not to put CBI at the top,
Okay.
based on their specialization. I mean, this is what they do for a living, is these kinds of buildings. And, you know, obviously, Corral Group was more into public safety, new public safety for the most part. Minimal amount of elevator work, so I think there's no doubt that they would fall in third. And, you know, I would have no problem with either CBI or GNAP in terms of giving us what we want for our project. I think either one of those two, any one of the three, but in particular those two would seem to have the experience and the whereabouts to perform as we hope they will.
So then, based on the evaluation, is it the consensus of this group that the overall rank in accordance with the RFQ and the town's design and selection procedures would be the top rank CBI, the second rank GNAP, and the third rank the Corral Group?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so then
Do you want
I
a
would
motion to
suggest
that
that,
effect?
this needs to be transferred over to the Board of Selectmen, so that would require a vote of this committee.
Okay, I'll take a motion to show the ranking as we've discussed.
Okay, so I make a motion that the rank be first CBI, second GNAP, third the Corral Group.
A second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Oh, great job. That was very interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
you people have a lot more experience in this than I do, and I thank you very much for all your input, because you definitely carried me in this process, and it's been an eye-opener, both talking to the three firms as well as dealing with, working with you people in terms of your knowledge and your expertise, and I hope people at home that watch this can see what good people we have working here in the office and working on your behalf. So, I'm impressed. I hope they will be, and I thank you very much, and I look forward to bringing this up to the Board of Selectmen and hopefully moving the project forward.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think our business and our mission has been accomplished.
Yep.
Now it's to the Board of Selectmen.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn at 2:20.
I second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.